I've been in Camden for 2 months and starting to get to know the borough better, starting to get to know a lot of you. And hope that through this event and through other events, there'll be more opportunities to talk to you and talk to you about the services we're delivering and how we work together to improve them. I think in some ways, Christine's introduction is a bit depressing. It sort of says that, we spent our lives working on this and we won't have made much difference in the end. It's not why we come to work. We do really want to make a difference. And I think the other point for me from that is most of the social housing stock we're going to have in the future, we already have. We are working hard on new supply, additional homes, both provision through the council and through housing associations. But actually, what we've got is what we've got to work with. And that's one of the themes of this conference, is making the most of what we've got and using it well. And I think it does relate to Camden's housing strategy. This is where I can make this work. And there's a specific chapter in the housing strategy, which was published last year, the right people in the right homes, getting the most out of housing in Camden. And you can see there's a long list of things we're doing to make the most efficient use of our stock. So we're working in the private sector to minimise the number of empty homes. We're tackling overcrowding as far as we can, and it's a real issue, as you'll know, in Camden. We have very high levels of overcrowding, particularly in social housing. The other side of that is we're working on a whole range of strategies around under-occupation, helping, persuading and tempting people whose families have moved on to move into smaller homes, trying to get the match in our accommodation to work better. We're tackling tenancy fraud. Again, in the last 2 years, bringing back into proper use over 200 homes. In terms of the expenditure of public money, it's a large sum that's saved and directed to make sure that housing actually goes to the right people. And that's a really important area of activity. Small scale, but actually every bit helps. And I think that's sort of part of our message, and part of what keeps us going is the fact that there's the big picture, but also within that, and focusing on our local authority, on Camden, there are a lot of things we can do to make the stock work for us and work to house as many people as appropriately as we can. We're working on reletting council homes more efficiently and more quickly. That turnover means less empty downtime where those homes aren't working to provide good places for people to live. We've been working through a hospital pathway, which is very developed in Camden, and it's one of the things that, coming in from the outside, I already knew about, because Camden is really seen as one of the leaders in developing that approach of bringing people through from street homelessness and from very severely vulnerable people through the hospital pathway into independent accommodation, mainly in the private sector. And that is really working for some very vulnerable single people. Working on private renting schemes, and again, making really good use of the accommodation that is there in the private renting sector. I think that's a real issue, and the interaction with welfare benefits reform is a real issue and a concern for us going forward. But again, it's an area where Camden's been really successful in being able to help people to find tenancies in the private sector and work with private sector landlords on that. And the next part of that is about, as a result, we've been able very successfully to reduce the amount of temporary accommodation that people needed to live in for long periods of time. And again, adaptations to existing homes, working on that to make sure that people's homes are suited for them as their lives change. I think, particularly today, I'm going to just focus on briefly the questions that we've got to answer in relation to the Localism Act. And again, it's about, will this help us make more efficient use of our stock? The sort of basic question, the reason why the government's through local enactment, introduced some more flexibilities for local authorities about how we let and manage our stock. And there are two key questions that we need to answer in developing a landlord policy. The first one is, should the council offer fixed-term tenancies for new tenants? And the second is, what happens to a council tenancy after the tenancy dies? What do we do about succession? And I think in terms of approaching those two questions, there are a whole range of issues and themes that we're thinking about, and I hope that some of the conversations that go on in the conference this morning after this help us actually move towards some answers to the questions. There's issues, I think, that are sort of underlying our approach to this are what impact would making changes to our policy in these areas have on the sustainability of the community? What our need and imperative to use the stock as efficiently as we possibly can? What's the purpose of social housing? The question that has been raised. Who are we housing? And what is the purpose of a social tenancy? And then the issue about the wide range of needs of individual households. So we've launched a major questionnaire, and that's gone out online, and the survey runs until the 25th of July. Many of you may have already seen it, so Tim returned it to us. What we've done is create a fact sheet that sets out the different options, some points of view, and some information. And we've kept it very simple to really encourage as many people as possible to answer the survey. So what I'm just going to do is quickly go through the two main questions we're asking. With some information, and the first responses we've had back. We've had about 120 responses back already, and I'll just show you what they're saying, really as sort of the background to some of the discussions that people had this morning in the workshops. So some of the sort of background information to why we might want to offer fixed-term tenancy. So things like 80% of people interested in foster care and need an extra room. Well, it might be foster caring for 10 or 15 years, but you might not want to do that forever. So should you have a larger tenancy that you then have for life, or should you have a tenancy that is going to last 10 or 15 years? And that's a sort of underlying sort of question. We've got 24,000 households on our housing register looking for social housing. When we've looked at their needs, about half of those people really do have housing needs. They're not just people who've self-registered as one option, but can meet their housing needs in other ways. On the other side, we're looking at more than 4,000 current council tenants are under-occupying. How can we help them move on? And would fixed-term tenancies help with that? So, in terms of the question, should the council offer fixed-term tenancies for new tenants? These are the answers so far. It may change, but this is what people are saying to us at the moment. 35% of people saying no, 34% of people saying yes, maybe 27%. So pretty evenly balanced across the responses. And these are the sorts of things people are saying to us, they're writing comments as part of their responses. So things like fixed-term tenancies offered only to most needy, who are then forced to leave after a limited period, will turn our estates into ghettos. It's an extreme point of view, but it's the sort of thing that actually is really worrying some people. On the other side, somebody saying social housing should only be used in an emergency for a few years until a tenant can then find work, pay their own way, and look for their own property. Another extreme view, really. And then some more in the middle. Each situation needs evaluation. The system for review needs really careful thinking through. So we're getting a lot of thoughtful responses, and I hope the discussion this morning will really take that forward. On to the other question that we're asking as part of creating the landlord policy: should the council allow people other than spouses, civil partners, and people in equivalent relationships to inherit a council tenancy after the tenant dies? You'll know that currently the statutory rights and additional rights in terms of accession to tenancies. So another question which has got some very diverse views in terms of the responses to it. But some interesting facts, I think, around this. Nearly 60% of people who do inherit are partners. It's only about 70 people a year inheriting council homes. It's relatively small numbers, but that could make a difference in terms of our supply figures. We only actually have about 1,000 tenancies to let in a year, so 70 tenancies is quite a large number. It's relatively large in that context. But then if you look on the other side, 90% of non-partners who inherit are adult children, are over 55, have lived in the home for over 20 years, and they'd be entitled to help to secure accommodation if they didn't inherit that home. So it does make you think, well, would it make a huge amount of difference if we change the rules about succession in that way? And here, at the moment, in terms of the people, 120 responses we've had so far, there's a very clear preference that the council should continue to allow people other than partners to inherit a council tenancy. 66 against 34. And then we asked the question about, if so, who should be able to inherit? And people seem to say other close relatives is the highest, people who have a legal right that haven't already been a succession, somebody else on the tenancy agreement, carers. So the sorts of people you would expect to inherit a home. But again, I think those are the sorts of answers you might expect. And again, some of the comments that people have made, a council tenancy shouldn't be considered an asset to be inherited. Council tenancies are in short supply, and passing them along as if they were owned exacerbates the supply problems. Or, on the other hand, the children of someone who dies should have the right to inherit the homes they've lived in all their lives. Someone who is a carer and has lived in the home most of my life, I don't think I should be forced out. Only real home that I've ever known. So you can see very strong feelings around this issue. And I think that this is really to open up the dialogue and the conversations we have today. These are the sorts of issues that we need to think through. We're going to need to set our policy. We're going to need to set it in the Camden context. And I think that is the point, that across the country circumstances are very different for different local authorities. And this is one of those areas where we do have more flexibility.